Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the UEFA Dynasty League football podcast. I'm your host, Erik of VFL Wolfsburg, and with me I have our regular co-host, Fred of Hercules. Fred, how you doing tonight?
I'm pretty tired, let me tell you. I was mowing the lawn today. It was only 74 degrees, but it was 84% humidity. And I don't have an electric or a gas lawnmower. I have the old push reel mower.
Oh, shit.
I have hills, and it sucks. So, yeah, I'm pretty tired right now.
So I think it might be time to upgrade your mower there. I think that's the lesson.
Well, the real trick is I have kids now, and they can push the goddamn thing.
True. Oh, you got a point there, Fred. But also, I have a guest with us who is right now the enemy of the state, I would say, making more enemies than he is friends, and that's Joel of West Ham. Joel, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
This is Jackson.
An enemy of the state, but
You.
wait.
Never mind.
So Joel, you're doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Well, we're happy to have you. If anyone's watching on YouTube, Joel's having some webcam malfunctions, so every time he talks, you'll just see a beautiful self-portrait of his face instead, which I think works. It's kind of like you're here. It's a little creepy, but we'll make do.
Yeah, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining in. We'll talk about whatever comes up.
Right up.
Yeah, so the first thing we have on the docket is to talk about a few players that are, I guess, hot topics or disagreements among people, and a few of them that went later in the draft, so they're kind of relevant. And the first one that comes up is Will Grier of West Virginia, now on Carolina, the proposed backup to Cam Newton. It's a player that I was trying to get in the 13th round, but unfortunately he didn't fall to my pick. And it looks like just going through, Morten Gladbach took the first copy at 1308. Getafe took the second pick at 1320, and our own Fred at 1323. So it should be a good combo. Joel, what do you have to say about Will Grier?
So I've watched Will Grier, not wholly intentionally, but mostly because he has played my Virginia Tech Hokies. But indeed because he was not a terrible college quarterback. And from what I've seen of him and what I saw going into the draft, especially during the Senior Bowl, I had very significant concerns about his ability to be an NFL quarterback. So I was a little bit surprised to see him going ahead of, established NFL players like Ryan Tannehill or Ryan Fitzpatrick, who we know are at least one of the two is going to be putting up some NFL points at some point in their career moving forward. Whereas Will Grier, I can't see him being anything more than a career backup. So for me, it's just a bit of a surprise to see him going this early when there were other options on the board that were certainly more capable than him in terms of actually putting up points in an NFL game.
Is this where I get to make the counterpoint?
I'm ready for a counterpoint. I've got ammunition, so to speak.
Joel, you ignorant slut.
I'm ready to be the Dwight of this league.
So let me preface this by saying that I don't really watch college football ever. I listen to some podcasts. I do some reading, find out who likes who, what players appear to be more interesting to evaluators of various types, analytics guys or guys who are looking at play on the field. And one of the things that your discussion point, stuck out in my head was, why would you take this guy over somebody like Fitzpatrick or Tannehill? And I think it really boils down to team composition or team strategy. A team like myself, and I can't speak for Morten Gladbach or Getafe, but I don't want guys who are on their last legs, regardless of whether they're starters or not. And in one case, Fitzpatrick is a starter, I guess, today, and Tannehill could maybe be a starter in Tennessee if the starter goes down. But I don't care about 2019. And in 2020, where are either one of those quarterbacks going to be? I know where Greer is going to be in 2020, and depending on what Cam's shoulder does, he could be in line for some significant playing time.
Yeah, that's a good point. The one thing that scared me, especially taking Cam Newton as early in the third round in this draft and owning him in other leagues, is that arm issue that surfaced somewhat at the end of last year really hasn't been discussed. And it's kind of been like, oh, no, Cam's starting. He's going to be fine. But there were reports that he might not even be ready to play week 1 this year. So while I mean, you can have as many reservations about Will Grier as you want, to say he's going to be a lifetime backup kind of says that he's not going to get his opportunity. And with Cam being as, run heavy as he is, and I mean, he is built to last, but he's going to miss games no matter how he plays. So he'll get a shot regardless if he's going to make do with it.
Too. He's not even projected as the second quarterback on that roster right now, which is a huge concern, right? So he's sitting behind a guy that has his level of arm strength, but has NFL experience in terms of Taylor Heineke. So what we're talking about is a guy that is not even in line for actual starting reps if the starting quarterback Cam Newton goes down. And even if he were to be thrown in, there's no guarantee that he's going to be any better than Nathan Peterson. So, Nathan Peterman. And yes, I know that's a bit of an offshoot there. I know that he's definitely going to be better than Peterman because everyone else in the NFL is. But there are many, many other quality backups in the NFL. So if you're talking about a backup that could actually see playing time behind a quarterback, then why not talk about Tom Brady's backup? Why not talk about these other guys that are more likely to get a shot and actually do something with it than Will Grier?
So if you want me to continue that conversation and kind of agree with you, look at where Will Grier was drafted versus Jacoby Brissett. And you talk about backups who have a chance of playing. He has played, and he has played relatively well, and he's still relatively young. And I think that's the real key when you're talking about, why are you drafting a backup at all? It's because you think he can develop into something. And I'm almost certain, that the copies of Grier went well ahead of Brissett here. And I think when I was making that choice, it was a question of, do I take the rookie or do I take the kid who actually, has shown something, but can still, it may be moving on and maybe moving to, another opportunity. And honestly, I don't know. I think the reason I took Grier was because it was the last copy available, and I was thinking Brissett might last until my next pick.
Which is fair. Absolutely a fair reason to make that choice, for sure. I'm just looking at guys that are still left on the board, like Blake Bortles, who
Bortles might not get drafted.
Sure, could put up better numbers in a backup situation this year and next year than Will Grier could. It just, again, having watched him, having seen the tape, having watched the Senior Bowl, I just can't see him putting up particularly good numbers, even if he had the opportunity, which is why I was wondering, I guess, why are these other guys still on the board? Again, it's not a bad idea to take him. I was thinking relative to these other players on the board, for sure.
Right. And one of the things that I was thinking was, I have basically hated every rookie quarterback that has come out in dynasty format for the past 6 or 8 years. I've ignored all of them. I didn't want any of them on my team. I refused to draft them even close to where they were projected. When their names were on the board, I was like, no, I don't want this guy. He's going to suck.
That's how you must on Mahomes. I'm totally with you.
And I have been proven wrong enough times now where I'm willing to take flyers on people who I don't necessarily think have a good shot because, damn it, some of them land.
From the opposite side, though, that's how you end up with Paxton Lynch.
and I drafted Chad Kelly.
Oh man! Oh,
I mean, it was a
no,
late.
that's okay
later
though,
pick.
because he makes your team better just through his bro energy. So
Exactly. And so I've missed out on a number of players, and I don't necessarily regret it because I generally organize my win now teams around cheap veteran quarterbacks. But at the same time, those cheap veteran quarterbacks are going to be retiring.
yeah, and we are not talking about round 3. So this is the time where taking that kind of a shot absolutely makes sense. So I can totally get behind you on that front.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. In round 13, you're getting with the 5th quarterback off the board in this draft, as well as a guy that, I mean, training camp hasn't even started, so they might have Heineke listed. But if you see upside in a quarterback that you took because you think he had upside, he's probably going to pass him on the depth chart. Maybe not to start the season, but eventually. So I think if just on a last second hope for Grier, it's not he's third in the depth chart. No reason to draft him. I think he's still got a shot at reps.
Yeah, honestly, if he was put on the practice squad, I would be thrilled. For the way
From a developmental
I my
perspective,
team.
absolutely.
Okay, well, you know what? Now that we talked a lot about Grier, we have you know what? You had a choice, Fred, at that in that 13th round. There was 2 players with 1 copy left, and I know you were in between the 2. And the other is the pot-smoking veteran, Josh Gordon. So tell us what made you choose Grier over Gordon.
This one comes down to, I guess, distribution of risk. I have owned or do own Josh Gordon in a number of other places. And my thought here was that just in case shit hits the fan even further, I will not expose myself to any further Josh Gordon risk.
And just to highlight where he went, he did go in the 11th round, the first copy, 1143 to Genoa, Atletico Madrid at 1317, and then Leicester took the last copy at 1330. So a little more distribution on Josh Gordon, obviously so, because no one knows if he's worth the risk at this point.
Right. So the interesting thing here is that the last couple of copies of Gordon were available while Will Grier was on the table, and all 3 copies of Will Grier went within 15 picks of each other. Leaving the last 2 copies of Josh Gordon to kind of fall, between the cracks there. And the last copy of Gordon was available at the same time the last copy of Grier was available at my pick. And I chose Grier over Gordon pretty much specifically because I don't know that Gordon will actually be back. And I'm willing to take the chance that when he comes back, he's not going to be worth a hell of a lot more in trade, because that's all I'm looking at here. I don't want necessarily Gordon to lead my team, or anything right now, but I would just be looking to move him once he has a 2 touchdown game or a 5 catch game or anything at all, or even gets reinstated for that matter. Just looking to flip him for profit.
As much shade as I like to throw at Grier right now, Josh Gordon is such a risk. And we've seen it time and time again. People get their hopes up. People hear the tidbits coming out of training camp, in this case, him working out with Tom Brady. But Josh Gordon has shown himself time and time again to be an individual that is not interested in football. I mean, it's not like pot is this debilitating drug. And I know that there are psychological issues with it and things like that. But we've seen this previously with another player in Ricky Williams. Very extremely talented player. Heart wasn't in the game. I don't think it's about the drug use at all. I think it's very much about motivation. And when you have a player that's clearly not motivated enough to take a step back and control things for a short period of time, then you see things like Josh Gordon, Justin Blackman, although Blackman had his own issues with alcohol abuse, Ricky Williams, extremely talented players, but guys that just showed time and time again that they are not ready or willing to put forth the effort to be an actual NFL player. So even if Josh Gordon were to pass every test, were to make a great impression in his meetings with the NFL elites, I still don't think day one that he's going, even if he steps on the field week 1, I don't think he's going to last the whole season. I don't think he's going to last a quarter of a season, because I just don't think he's that interested in the game. So that's where it comes down to. We're not super early in the draft anymore. We're relatively late, where we're talking about guys like Will Grier. I still don't think that there's enough value in a guy that's not interested in the game to be taking him over guys, running backs, for example, or wide receivers that could be putting up fantasy numbers for a few years. It's just not worth the risk, in my opinion, of course.
So to put this into real world value terms, who is more likely to be worth a future, a 2020 second round pick in September? Josh Gordon or Will Grier?
Will Grier, for sure.
And that was
which is crazy, right?
But both of them, for a 13th round pick, you don't expect that kind of return. But at the same time, you're like, well, I see a path for both of them, but the wider path, I think, is Will Grier.
Yep.
And looking at people that went around this 13th range, I'm going to say Genoa reached a little bit because he could have waited another round. They took the first copy. But you look in the 13th, the rookie receivers going are Deontay Johnson and Jalen Hurd, guys that are buried in the depth charts. The draft capital isn't as high as a rookie you'd like, and not a particularly deep class. So those are the guys that you had to choose Gordon over to get him. And I mean, I think that shows where anyone that has a potential starting spot was pretty much taken, unless they, aging guys where, teams that aren't looking for that short value for a year or two. Other than that, people are taking rookie shots over Josh Gordon. I think that goes to show you, just like you said, Joel, he's not interested in the game for whatever reason. And, if you do get a flash in the pan, I mean, I think every Josh Gordon owner has learned, sell him when you can, because you're not always going to be able to sell him.
You just made another great point, too. He's not a young receiver anymore. This isn't 24-year-old Josh Gordon. This is 28-year-old Josh Gordon that we're talking about. Even if he has an amazing year, what does that mean for next year and the year after?
We've been saying, for so many years now, oh, he's only 24 years old. He'll come back. He's only 25 years old. But he's not anymore. And it's been the same thing now for how many years? I mean, even last year when he was on the field, he wasn't a consistent difference maker. He flashed. He had a couple spectacular plays and games, but for the most part, he was pretty goddamn mediocre. And
you're comparing him to guys like Corey Coleman, which I would take Corey Coleman over Gordon, honestly, right. Which should be telling. So, although, yeah, don't you guys be picking up Corey Coleman yet? Sorry to name drop. That guy's fine.
Do I have a pick coming up?
That's with Josh Gordon. I think it's just a disappointment to the game too, because we all loved watching him play, and the Browns didn't have any reason to watch the Browns, and he made it. So you were watching Browns games because he was tearing up top defenses. So
he was ridiculously good.
Well,
he didn't want to be there. That's all we could have taken away from that, unfortunately.
While we're on the topic of disappointments, and this one's not so much on the player himself, but because of the injury he sustained, and that's Donta Foreman of the Houston Texans.
Absolutely.
This is a guy that I saw him in his first year before the injury, unfortunately, and I traded for him in my hometown dynasty because I said, this guy looks great. He looks electric. I gave up Mariota, who was a good quarterback prospect at the time, to pick up him and Duke Johnson. But he looks so great with the Texans. Everyone was dumping their Lamar Miller shares because they said, this guy's the real deal. All of a sudden, he gets this Achilles tear. And he hasn't recovered. He was supposed to be back next this previous season and halfway through. And even when he was marked as healthy, he really didn't get that many reps. I don't know if he got any, actually. And if he did, he didn't look anything like his old self.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and talk, Joel? I'm still looking up some stats here.
All right. So for me, Deontay Foreman has always been kind of an enigma, right? So Washington College, of course, thought he was a very dynamic kind of big guy. Dynamic big guys are not that common, right? we go back and we look at guys. So sorry, I keep thinking of Jerome Bettis, right? But we go back and we look and we don't see that many guys at his size. He's 230, 240, and actually being able to move like a much smaller guy. So you watched him come out, you watched him have a good combine, you watched him go down with injury and just be able to, or not be able to come back from that, as you'd mentioned. That said, I took Kareem Hunt over him, and I felt really stupid doing so. And then Kareem Hunt blew up, and even now I'm like, well, maybe I should have taken Deontay Foreman. I think that he is in for a very good season as long as he can stay healthy. So I actually have high hopes for him. I've heard a lot of good news coming out of camp. He's sounding healthy. It's sounding like he's finally gotten over that Achilles, which is not an easy thing to recover from. Like, think about it. That's that you're walking on it all day, every day. So it's not an easy thing to recover from. I think that anybody that picked him in this draft, and I'm really not like banging myself on the head for missing out on him. Anyone that got him in this draft as late as he went is in for a positive return on their investment for sure.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because there was an opportunity cost for taking Deontay Foreman, and the 3 copies of Foreman went fairly closely together, but the first copy went while a third copy of Devin Singletary was still there.
So I'm a huge Bills fan, and don't get me wrong, I love Devin Singletary. I don't think he has the upside of Deontay Foreman. He doesn't have the capability. He doesn't have the move capability, and Singletary is in a much more crowded backfield. So I would have taken Foreman over him for sure.
I tend to look a little longer than this season, though, because Singletary, yes, this season he has a crowded backfield, but the people who he's crowded with are all, I think they add up to 100 years old when you have their age.
TJ Yeldon isn't that old. And honestly, I would put him around the level of TJ Yeldon. So if that's and again, huge Bills fan, do watch college, and that's about the level I would put him on. And that's fair. I was disappointed when Singletary was taken, to be quite honest. He's just a mediocre back. He's a replacement level kind of back, and I see a higher upside for Deontay Foreman.
So, Joel, now, are you concerned with the Achilles at all? Because he was supposed to be back in the middle of last year, and I'm looking at his stats because I clearly didn't remember. 7 rushes for -1 yards, 2 receptions for 28 yards, and a touchdown. That's his 2018 stat line.
Yes,
and before Joel answers that, I just want to say that
thing to recover from. If I hadn't heard the positive news over this offseason, and people blow smoke up people's butts all the time over the offseason, so I get that. But the news that we've been reading, I do feel confident enough to invest in him, especially this late in the draft, even over the rookie guys like Singletary. Because let's be honest, like rookie backs almost dime a dozen this late in the draft. We're not talking about Saquon Barkley, right? We're not talking about Nick Chubb. We're not talking about these much younger guys. Much better guys. We're talking about a middle of the road, productive college back that doesn't have any particularly standout capabilities relative to a guy like Foreman, who, again, big guy with move capability. So it's really, at this point, especially this late in the draft, when you're comparing guys like those two, or like looking at who's left on the board or who's available, when you're making those comparisons, you don't, of course, you look at, future openings in the backfield where Singletary, yes, he's surrounded by a bunch of old dudes, and TJ Yeldon, who has been bounced around at this point a little bit. But you also got to consider upside. Why wouldn't the Bills go out and draft another guy higher next season, especially if you've got Josh Allen firing on all cylinders? If the receivers are starting to show something, then they might go out and pick somebody up. So you can't just assume that the holes in the backfield that are going to be vacated by McCoy and the completely indestructible Frank Gore, you can't just assume that those aren't going to be filled next year and that Singletary is going to get his shot. Because he's nothing particularly special, whereas Foreman at least has that level of upside.
So I guess this is where I have to handicap myself, and I don't know whether it is a hindrance or a benefit that I don't watch college football.
It honestly might be a benefit.
So I haven't seen what he did and how he played against his peers. I only, saw, some of the analytics, some of the analysis of what other people said about him.
Right.
And he was dynamic. He was great. But at the same time, is that who he will be again? I mean, what's the last
with that injury
running back who came back from an Achilles injury was anyone?
Somebody. I swear there's somebody.
There may be. But the odds are against him. Everything sounds great, and he might push Miller out of that role. And he should be talented enough to do it if he's healthy enough to do it. But other players I wanted to mention real quick, while we're talking about who you missed out on to take him, were Jalen Samuels and Jerick McKinnon. And I think both of them have a better shot at production than Foreman does, given the odds.
Yeah, I would give you McKinnon for sure.
Yeah, and so
he would have been my lowest of the three.
Really, it's just I guess I have a thing for flashy guys.
Yeah,
that spark score though.
So just to recap, Foreman did go a little bit earlier than the guys were talking. 10:30 to Barcelona, 11:03 to Leicester, and 11:14 to Hamburg. So that's where we were with Foreman. But before we get carried away about talking about Dante Foreman for 15 minutes, let's move on to the last guy before we go into team reviews, and that's Josh Oliver, rookie tight end on the Jaguars, who went. First copy was much earlier to Atletico Madrid at 12:32. Then he went actually fairly recently, the last two copies, 14:20 to Man City and 15:04 to the four-headed dragon of Real Betis. But I'll let you carry this one, Fred, because I know you're the one that wanted to bring him up.
Yeah, his draft position was just something that stuck out to me because I was looking for the copies while I was trying to find where. Generally, when I'm trying to make a pick here, I want to know who's available and which copies are available and when they went to determine whether I want to take that shot now or maybe push it back a little bit further. And went looking for the third. There was one copy of Josh Oliver left, and I couldn't find the first one until I scrolled way the hell up the draft. And wow, I'm not sure why he went a full 2 rounds ahead of copy 2, but that seems awfully high for a rookie tight end in a league that I wouldn't call tight end premium. I would call maybe
tight end plus
special.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have an opinion, I guess. I do like Josh Oliver's situation more than his draft position. So we're talking about a team that has a quarterback that is capable of putting the ball in the air. Not necessarily accurate always with Nick Foles, but a guy that can get the ball in the air. And a ground game that can keep the guys like linebackers honest. So when you're talking about competition for receptions, who are we talking about on the Jags depth chart? It's Marquise Lee and D.D. Westbrook? Is that really competition for balls in the air? Giggity. No, I think that it is a decent situation. I might not have taken him 2 rounds ahead of his other copies, but I can understand why people might be enamored, at least with his capabilities there. Now, I wasn't super impressed with him in college, but I didn't watch him that much in college because he played for San Diego State. So, to be quite honest, he's kind of an unknown from that perspective outside of NFL scouting, but he does have a pretty good position to actually get reps early on. So I can understand it from that perspective.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add about him, I don't know much about him at all, but when you're taking people this late and there's a rookie you like or a rookie you think has a path for production early on, especially at tight end where you don't see it, it's not a bad pick. So based on just where he landed and where he could shine, if he is a pass catching receiver, because I don't even know that, he would be in the right mold. That's for sure.
So I think that's the conundrum I was in. I had that. I traded up for the pick because basically it was given away, and he was sitting there on the board, the last copy, and I had to decide: do I want Josh Oliver or do I want Dawson Knox?
That's the other name I was going to mention too. Dawson Knox, again, huge Bills homer, would not have taken Knox ahead of Oliver.
You would not have taken him.
Would not have taken him ahead of Oliver. Because I don't think that
Off-season.
I love Josh Allen. I don't think that there are going to be enough reps to go around in Buffalo. I think it's going to be much more focused on the ground game. Like, I love Fournette. I don't want to take away from him, but I think that they're going to have to air it out more with Jacksonville than in Buffalo, where they have a million guys to rotate. So I think that Oliver has a better situation, and Knox went in a bit of a different situation.
Interesting. I don't know much about Buffalo other than all of their tight ends appear to be injured and in line to start as a rookie.
We have
don't know that
year over year.
the Jacksonville
talked about, we're going to see Charles Clay do something. No, we do not see them do anything. It's very disappointing. And obviously these guys are both third rounders, so it's not like there's a huge gulf between them. But if I were to pick a situation that I would prefer my tight end to be in, I would say Jacksonville.
All right. Well, I think that's it for our hot topic of players, especially some that went kind of recently. So I think that's a good discussion we had there. But to bring us to the enemy of the state, as I referred to him, who the well-spoken, I must say, Joel of West Ham. Joel, we're going to give you an opportunity to go over your roster, and then Brett and I will go through it with you afterwards. So go ahead, Joel. Give us the main overview of how you attack this startup draft.
So I saw everybody going running back early, and I was like, fuck it. May as well go wide receiver. To be quite honest, that's what ended up happening. So I had a slightly later pick in the first, and that kind of set the tone for my team. So obviously I went tight end very early, ended up with Michael Thomas, Sammy Watkins, and A.J. Brown. And then I immediately turned to quarterback. So Carson Wentz is a guy that I have a lot of faith in from a long-term perspective. He looked extremely good when he wasn't injured. So I have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to put up numbers for a significant period of time. Mitch Trubisky is a guy that I have less faith in, to be honest. But I also believe that he's going to have the reins of that offense for long enough that even if he doesn't stick it out as an above average NFL quarterback, I'll have time to replace him. But he's going to put up the numbers for me as necessary. And then Tom Brady, fuck Tom Brady, I've got to say that. But Tom Brady is a guy that doesn't seem to have an end to his career. I think when it happens, and it could be this year, it could be next year, it's going to be dramatic, much as it was with Peyton Manning. But until that point, I'm going to take those numbers and maybe even use them as trade bait, assuming my team is going to suck terribly. So that's kind of what my thoughts were like early on. I still was able to get a few of my target guys. Very pissed off that I didn't get my target wide receivers. So screw you guys for taking Corey Davis. Screw you guys for taking Will Fuller. You dicks. But I was really happy to get Evan Ingram. Really happy to get Kalen Ballage, for example, and Royce Freeman for sure. But Kalen Ballage is a guy that I think he's sitting behind Kenyon Drake, which, let's be honest, Kenyon Drake isn't that special. So I think Ballage has a good opportunity to come in and get more reps and actually put up some numbers. So I was basically kind of banking on the guys ahead of guys are going to suck at running back, because if that doesn't happen, I'm kind of screwed here. But outside of that, I'm really happy to get a young core of wide receivers that should last a little while. Devin Funchess, everyone loves to hate on Devin Funchess, and I am one of those guys. But damned if I wasn't going to take him that late when he has Andrew Luck throwing to him. So it's just like guys like that where I see the upside, I see the potential in these guys. That's really what I was looking for.
So let's talk about your startup trades and kind of strategy you took here. Um, I will get back to your roster in a second because I think it's very interesting the way you drafted here. But it looks like you haven't traded a lot in the draft, and the trades you made were kind of to trade down. You still have all of your future picks, which covers you, like you said, in case your team sucks, but you're one of the few teams that has 3 legit starting quarterbacks. So you're covered for the entire season to start 2 every week.
Yeah.
And
that was definitely intentional. This is not a quarterback light league. So last season, these quarterbacks might not have been amazing, but the season before that would have been 2 top 12 quarterbacks. So I was definitely looking for long-term quarterback depth. And I say that having drafted Tom Brady, but they're going to be a core of a team. So quarterbacks are guys that last a long time, right? These are not guys that go away like running backs or wide receivers. These are guys that can be around for a very significant time. So, you talked about targeting a guy like Will Grier because he could actually be useful for longer. That's kind of what I was thinking early on in this draft is even if I didn't get my target running backs, which obviously I did not, I was still going to be set for a longer period of time than if I had gone running back heavy early.
So without getting, too much, into your head here, you didn't take a running back until the 7th round.
Yep, that sounds right.
Who were your running back targets that you missed out on?
Really, I didn't feel like I missed out on too much. So it would have been Saquon if I had been able to. But Nick Chubb was a guy that I really wanted, but he went earlier than I ever would have imagined. So Nick Chubb was a guy I felt that I really missed out on, a guy that I really wanted on my roster, but I didn't want to put that kind of draft capital into a guy like that at running back. Again, the NFL is a league where running backs drop much faster than quarterbacks. And in the start 2 quarterback league, I felt that I really needed to invest there first.
So it looks like you had to skip out on Chubb in order to take Wentz. All the copies of Chubb went right around where Wentz was.
Yep.
And then you didn't have a 3rd round pick because you traded back. So
right.
Chubb went, I think from like 2.5 to 220 or something like that. So you had an opportunity to take him, but decided
Wentz was way higher. So I would have taken Chubb around later, but obviously he was not available then. So
yeah, I don't think that was reasonable to assume.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you would have. Everyone wants to take players that are possible.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, and we went over the quarterbacks, which, I mean, you're set up for the future for now to have quarterbacks 2 starting every week, which is great. Now, the only problem I have with that is that you do have some young guys where the value is going to go up on them. But outside of Michael Thomas and, say, Sammy Watkins, who is always injured, I mean, I root for him. He has proven that he can't stay healthy a whole year. I don't see how this team is going to be able to compete with the top teams this year. So my question to you is, was Watkins like if he becomes that receiver 1 that we've always wanted him to be, then your team is that competing? And if he isn't that,
to be fair. So that played a role. But yeah. Well, he's
yes.
And if he does hit, then I'll probably be looking to move him. Mostly because I want my team to get younger. So I know I didn't trade heavily into getting more picks for more future picks, but I also tried to draft for a younger base with high upside. So, you're looking at guys like John Ross, Devin Funchess, who is still relatively young, A.J. Brown at the wide receiver position. These are guys that all have decent upside. Ross, I think, was criminally underused. For what he's capable of. He's got a terrible quarterback for his skill set. Let's focus on that a little bit. But outside of that, AJ Brown, I think Mariota's capable of putting up higher numbers. So I think I've really focused on getting younger guys with higher upside at that position, nail down tight ends. which I feel really good about the Evan Ingram and Gerald Everett situation. So I really focused on guys that have that upside without being ancient, outside of Shady and Tom Brady.
So Joel, and just to get your opinion on your strategy, at least Dynasty in general, at least this team in general, you want to build this young core and then possibly attack when it's hot, or are you always going to be the type of owner that has to be young, and when you win, your team's going to be young anyway because you always want to be gaining value? And you have Tom Brady and LaShawn McCoy. I'm not saying you're going no veterans, but teams that generally tend to get younger and only younger don't push that all in button when they need to. So is that what you're trying to do? Like push it when you're ready, or is it more of a just wait until these young guys become elite and you're going to have a bunch of stars?
So historically what I've done dynasty wise is take shots on high upside guys so I gather a lot of picks. Didn't do it this time, but gather a lot of picks, take shots on high upside guys, and trade into that elite status. So this is not a win now team. I never expected this to be a win now team. I do expect to be middling ish. And as soon as I see, if I'm going to fail miserably, then I'll start to trade those older guys away. But I also wanted them there in case some of these younger guys hit. So I do take shots when I see them available. So it's definitely been about looking for upside and trying to find that. Of course, that's all we all do, right? Is trying to find upside where you can. But it definitely wasn't being built as a win now team. It was more being built as a young team with upside. And if a guy hits, then I'm not going to be looking to keep him on my team long term necessarily, unless he's a guy that's super young, like a Saquon Barkley, for example. I will probably be looking to move and pick up more younger pieces until I build up that depth. Yeah. So I guess that's really what I'm going for, is building up that depth.
So the thing I love about your team is that it is chock full of players that I have personally ranked far lower than you have taken them.
Nice.
And every time that happens, I'm like, yes, keep taking those guys that I don't want. And I
did that so much this draft too. So it's funny though, because we all have our own rankings, right?
Yeah.
So it's really funny to see that happening with other players. I love it.
And you talked about Sammy Watkins earlier, but when you took him on, it looks like June 17th, he was looking like he would totally be a wide receiver one, given the opportunity of Hill being out half the season or more. And 3 weeks later, we're saying, Sammy who? Yes, yeah. And it's just back to where he's been for the rest of his career. Evan Ingram, I think, could be the best receiver on the New York Giants with 30 catches.
So yeah, Evan Ingram is a big one for me. I absolutely see very high upside for him. Sterling Shepard is the who guy for me on that team. Eli Manning is awful. Daniel Jones is awful. But if they're going to throw to somebody, Evan Ingram's going to be that guy, right? So it's Saquon Barkley. But it's going to be Evan Ingram catching those passes. So I'm definitely happy with that.
So the way I see your roster as, just as a whole, is kind of high risk for the talent that you have. I mean,
and if it sucks, then I got higher draft picks because I didn't
blow up or blow up.
Okay, so now that we talked about Joel's team, I think it's a good time to move on to our next team. And the next team we talk about is going to be Real Zaragoza, I guess is how you say it. This is Carl's team. He reached out, and just to give you guys a quick overview, it looks like he traded away his 2020 rounds 1, 2, and 3. He also acquired Roma's 2020 second, so he's down a first and a third. So definitely more of a win now team. Taking a quick look at it, his two heavy hitters are Christian McCaffrey and Odell Beckham, which is obviously both young and great players to have on your team. he's also got Zach Ertz, another young tight end star, and the tight ends do score a little more heavy in this league. So Ertz, a guy that gets almost 100 receptions a year at this point, should be a solid start for him at tight end.
He gets the receptions with Nick Foles, though.
Yeah, I guess, but he had like 90 receptions the year prior with mostly Wentz. So I don't think Wentz doesn't look at him. I think he'll still perform well. You don't think so?
I think
I'd be more concerned about injuries with Ertz than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and with tight ends, I mean, God, they always get injured. It's a tough position, but I think Ertz has remained healthy the last 2 years. I don't know about his young career, but let's hope he keeps playing. But anyway, to finish off the roster, he's got Tom Brady and Marcus Mariota at quarterback. So definitely waited on quarterback, but got serviceable guys he can start. They're not going to win him any games, but they could be the backbone to his supporting cast. Other guys on the roster that will be the extra flexes would be Mike Williams, Marvin Jones. He's got N'Keal Harry for the Patriots, so that's really a boomer bust guy on a team that's looking more win now. He's got Tevin Coleman as well for running back depth. So overall, I do like the studs he has here. I think he's collected a good group of guys. Again, the N'Keal Harry choice, maybe there wasn't anyone there he liked, but I probably would have went someone more win now to fill out those extra flexes. But otherwise, I really do like this roster.
I'm going to see who went right around that spot. I don't know if he was targeting Harry to try and pair with, stack with Brady. I mean, he didn't take Brady until later, but his options were limited. Robert Woods, Mike Williams, Calvin Ridley was there, so that was an option.
You said he could have took Robert Woods?
He could have taken Robert Woods, yes.
Yeah, I mean Robert Woods with this roster, that's one of the top teams in La Liga if he has Robert Woods on this team instead of Harry. In my opinion, I mean, I own Harry. I hope he blows up, but I'm just saying, based on this roster, I think I would have went someone a little more win now.
Yeah, it seems it's an odd pick for considering the rest of the roster makeup.
I think he's got the upside though to make it, because it's not like you're lacking depth on this roster. So having an upside guy like that is definitely not a bad idea.
So yeah, he's not going to be starting in week one. That's obvious. His starters are Brady, Mariota, Coleman, McCaffrey, Beckham, Jones, Ertz, and probably Mike Williams. So he's got room to play here. And he can wait for Harry to come along. He can cover injury, cover bye week, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys think this team is going to be able to compete this year? Where do you see him falling?
Without comparing him to the rest of La Liga, I don't know, but from what I've seen in some of our other conversations, there are some tough teams in this league.
For me, if, say, Christian McCaffrey goes down, I think it's going to be a tough push. I think like one injury derails this roster, which is unfortunate. But there's not a ton of depth, obviously, at quarterback or at running back. So this is built to be a win now team, but I think it's a shallow win now team would be my concern.
Yeah, I think he kind of pushed all in to get two top 6 or 7 overall ADP, guys in McCaffrey and Beckham, and depending on how you spell them out, they could be top 5 guys. But after that, he had to play catch up. And he's done a pretty good job building this roster and giving himself some options. So bully to him. He traded away his future picks and got a lot for them.
Right. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. There's still plenty of time left before the season starts. So we will wait and see. But there's your mixed review from the boys on the UEFA Dynasty podcast. Borussia Mönchengladbach wanted a shout out. He said it in UEFA Dynasty. So there you go, Blake. I hope you enjoyed that. It's Borussia Mönchengladbach. That's how you say it in German. But moving on to our next team, it's going to be Union Berlin, his Bundesliga buddy. And quickly going over that roster, it looks like we have, I'm looking for his first pick, but it looks like Alvin Kamara. There it is, Alvin Kamara. He's got some assets at running back. Alvin Kamara, Le'Veon Bell, Sony Michel, and Josh Jacobs. So that's one hell of a RB crew, if you ask me. And it clearly shows because if you look at the rest of the team, there aren't that many solid options. At receiver, you're looking at Chris Godwin, Hakeem Butler, and James Washington. At tight end, you're looking at Eifert, Herndon, and Cook. And lastly, at quarterback, it looks like Derek Carr is his main starter. Nick Foles and Jacoby Brissett round up the quarterbacks. He doesn't have any future picks. He used all those to trade up to get some of his guys here. So this is probably one of the most running back heavy teams we have in the league. We'll start off with you, Fred. What do you think?
So let me preface this by saying that he traded his first round pick to me, and I hope him the worst luck this year. This looks like a roster to me that didn't necessarily read the scoring rules, and maybe went too running back heavy. I mean, they're solid running backs. I mean, you talk about Kamara and Bell, and if they're both at the top of their game, they're phenomenal. But he has upside hope at wide receiver, and quarterback's a mess.
Yeah, and when you're looking at this roster, you're thinking starting 4 running backs and 1 receiver, maybe 2 if you can't start 2 quarterbacks. I mean, you're hoping that Josh Jacobs breaks off fast and that you're just a running team, which given the flexibility of this league, you can totally do that. And especially with his PPR backs, so this is a full PPR league, Kamara and Bell should have safe floors. So it's not a balanced team, but every Sunday he should have 8 starters to at least, keep up with the teams. Maybe not beat them, but at least keep up.
You still got to start at least one guy at every position, though. And
he's
going to see a starting tight end there. Jared Cook is old. I don't see a starting wide receiver. I don't see a starting tight end. I barely see a starting quarterback. So that's rough, especially trading away your first. I mean, I love this running back core. Alvin Kamara is my boy. Love Alvin Kamara. Hate Le'Veon Bell, but I know he's going to put up the numbers. I do love the running back core, but you can't win games if you don't have starters at the other positions.
Well, here, Joel, let me preface this. So let's say the running backs aren't injured; they start off hot. Chris Godwin, who only has Mike Evans alongside him now with Deshaun Jackson gone, starts off the season great. And you have Jared Cook, who, like you said, is really old, but it has become Drew Brees, one of his main targets. So he's eating up the points. Does this team compete with Derek Carr at quarterback, given that Chris Godwin is emerged into a receiver 2, let's say, and Jared Cook is putting up tight end 1 numbers?
Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think Carr is going to put up anything like the numbers you would need to compete in this league. There are some really, really strong teams that are built to be win now that have at least a starter at every position.
Right, and see, that's where I disagree. If he gets one of those receivers to be a top receiver where he can start him every week, I think he's going to have a tight end that's hot.
Top receiver. Like he doesn't have top receiver upside.
You don't think Chris Godwin could be a top receiver?
I don't think he can be a wide receiver 2. Well, okay, he can be a wide receiver 2. I don't think he can break that top 16 wide receivers. No.
Now, you see, I think given Tampa Bay's roster, he can easily become a top 20 receiver because
you can't forget that they have one of the league's better tight ends in OJ Howard that's going to be taking those reps.
Like, I mean, he's not going to take the reps. He's going to be out of the field.
He's not just the wide receiver 2 soaking up all those targets. OJ Howard and Mike Evans are going to be soaking up the majority of the not that many targets. Let's be honest here with Jameis Winston, not that many targets to go around. I don't think there's going to be enough to feed Godwin as a wide receiver 1 at all.
Not that many targets in a Bruce Arians offense that aired it out the hell last year without him.
Jameis Winston with Mike Evans and OJ Howard, I don't think it's going to feed Chris Godwin.
But Winston has never fed Howard.
Well, Howard's been around for 1 season. That's
30-year player.
No, yeah, it's his 3rd year.
Oh, sorry. It always takes tight ends a fair bit to get ramped up. So I mean, that's obviously personal opinion here, but I absolutely don't see Godwin getting the targets, and I don't see him making great use of those targets anyway. So no, but if let's say miracles happen, let's say Chris Godwin is a wide receiver 1. That's then you have to assume that Jared Cook is a tight end 1, and that Derek Carr can up his numbers back to even where he was, a couple of years ago. I don't see it as being likely personally.
Gotcha.
Well, let's be honest here. It doesn't take much to be a tight end 1. It's a 16-team league.
Oh gosh, no. Well,
and anything
very much true. Yeah.
Don't really.
Okay, but so Fred, be the tiebreaker. If he has, say, a tight end that gets hot and he has a receiver that gets hot, do you think he's going to compete with the top teams?
Honestly, I think this is going to be a team that chooses the wrong last 2 starters more often than not. He's got 5 or 6 that he can count on, or that they're just no brainer. You put in the lineup, but after that, it's, do you start the second quarterback? Do you start a second receiver? Do you, who is that last guy on your roster? And God damn it, if you not pick the right guy every single time, you're just going to get screwed over. And I see this team, given the scoring rules here with the way the ties are structured, I think there's going to be a lot of ties in his future.
Oh yeah,
right.
That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got so obsessed with the startup draft that a lot of owners are like, "Oh wait, you could draw." Like I think Napoli asked in the group chat the other day, like, "Do both teams draw?" And we're like, "Yeah, that's how it works. Both teams tie." So and I think that's what I really love about this league idea the most, is that there's going to be weeks where a team like me, where I'm clearly not competing, is going to draw a top team, and it's gonna make the difference in the end. So, in a lot of leagues that I play in, especially with a high amount of owners, you'll have, say, the bottom 25% of teams where you don't even check them because you're beating them, and if there's an upset, everyone goes crazy, but it's so unlikely. In this league, they're more likely to happen, and there's gonna be more of them. So it should keep everyone at least interested in, say, top team versus bottom team kind of thing. But now that I said my little part boosting the league that I made, of course, I love the idea. We have one more team we want to review, and I'm going to pull it up now because I don't remember who it was. It was Sevilla. Sevilla, a friend of the podcast, wants us to talk about his team, and I'll go down a quick rundown. He's definitely got some studs on this team with Christian McCaffrey and Devontae Adams, kind of like the Union Berlin we just mentioned. He's got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, Eli Manning, Drew Lock, and Nick Foles. So, yeah, he's got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Moving on, he's got some depth options, Kenyon Drake and Duke Johnson at running back. At receiver, he's got T.Y. Hilton as his number 2, Albert Wilson, who was getting hot before he got injured last year. And at tight end, he's got some serviceable options to start, but nothing great with Hooper, McDonald, and Darren Waller. It looks like future pick-wise, he traded away his first 2 picks. Actually, it looks like he traded away all of his picks, but he also managed to obtain a future 3rd and 2 future 4th. So he's got some flyers next year, but he did trade away the main bulk of that. Just looking at his startups picks, he doesn't have anything past round 20. He's got like 14, 18 round picks. It looks like 4 picks between round 16 and 17. So he must like some flyers in that range, because it looks like that's where he built his entire the future of the draft. Nothing in the late ends, but definitely a lot of picks coming up. So, Joel, we'll start with you this time. What do you think about this roster?
I like this more than I should. So I'm a big fan of Austin Hooper. I think he is looking at a breakout season, and I don't think Vance McDonald's a bad guy to have behind him. So I'm not too terribly worried about their tight end depth there. As far as running back goes, Christian McCaffrey definitely was a guy that surprised me coming out. Thought for sure that there was no way that he could run between the tackles. And, of course, he's ridiculously good. So as far as a starting running back, I think he's great. Depth-wise, I don't know. Kenyon Drake, he's a guy that I've already lambasted a little bit here with Kalen Ballage behind him, I think being just as good. I don't know how long he's going to hold that starting running back position. Jalen Richard is just another guy, just like Duke Johnson, just another guy. That's not to say that they can't put up good weeks, but if we're talking about having, like you said, having to pick those guys as your flex guys, it starts to become a little bit more difficult. T.Y. Hilton, I do really like him. I think that Andrew Luck will finally come back from injury and then actually be able to feed T.Y. So I think that there's a solid 2 there, and Albert Wilson it could be a surprise guy this year. Quarterback, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron freaking Rodgers, so I think he'll rebound from his less than super stellar but still really good season last year. Eli Manning is probably going to fall off a cliff, but he could put up a week or two. So it's not a start 2 quarterback league, right? It's a super flex league. So I think that there's enough depth here to make a punch toward the top, but I think there are going to be some weeks, just like with the last team, where we're going to see some tough choices, so to speak, when it comes to flex guys.
Yeah, I'm seeing 6 starters here and not 8. I mean, there's time to pick up more players, but there's not a whole lot of players to pick up. He's going to be torn, between, does he start Nick Foles or Eli Manning as a super flex? Is that something you want to do, or is that something that you do because you have to do? He could be starting 2 tight ends. Again, all 3 of his tight ends, I think, are easily tight end 1s, top 16 guys. But I don't see any of them being higher than top 6 or 7. So, they're all going to be pray for a touchdown kind of player. Do you want to put 2 of those in your starting lineup? No, not consistently, unless they completely blow up. So, looking at his roster, I see Rodgers, Drake, McCaffrey, Adams, Hilton, a tight end. That's 6 guys. Who are your 7 and 8?
It's a good question.
Drew Lock, surprise starter.
Well, okay, so yeah, or I mean, it could be one of the quarterbacks. It could be Foles. It could be Manning.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like I said, it's going to be a tough back end of that. But I think a couple of these guys are going to emerge. I think they're going to find their regular 8. It's just going to be tougher during bye weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to find this problem as we go through rosters week by week. Is that they're missing their last, pick or 2. And, there are a couple teams with the full roster that look really good, but there's definitely a lot of teams with these question marks that can emerge. I think that's where I would put Sevilla. I don't put him as the studs can carry him all the way, and I don't put him as having the depth to keep up with the top teams. But say Kenyon Drake's an RB1 and Duke Johnson somehow getting enough receptions to be an RB2. All of a sudden, this team is a top team. No doubt about it. So
I'm with you. Middle with the ability to punch up.
And I think a lot of teams are going to be there.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And he's got upside. He's got a solid floor of the guys who are going to be his core starters. And if he gets unexpected production out of a guy like Hilton or Kenyon Drake, and they become Hilton becomes a top half wide receiver one, top 8 kind of guy, and Drake is a running back one himself, he's set. He's done a decent job of setting up, his bye weeks so that they're across the board. So that's not an issue, with the exception of the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams stack. They're both going to be out, and that's almost a guaranteed loss that week. The question is week 11 a doubleheader week?
Ooh, that'd be rough.
I don't think so off the top of my head.
I don't remember. I haven't looked at the schedule.
Let me take a look.
And I think you're going to see some teams jockeying throughout the season when they look at the schedule and see how it plays out and see where their team is. You're going to see guys trying to dump players who have a bad bye week combination with someone else on their roster, so that they can try to ease the pain, as it were.
Week 11 is not a doubleheader week. It is a single week.
Well, good for Sevilla. Yeah, honestly, I do. I like a lot of the guys on this roster, but it just doesn't stand out as probably one of the year one contenders.
Right. I think we did good here. So that's the last thing we had on the docket. So I guess we'll move on to our concluding thoughts. Joel, do you have anything you'd like to say before you get on?
Not particularly. I think this is such a cool league format, and honestly, all the shit we're talking right now can change very dramatically with injuries leading up to week 1. So I'm really looking forward to finishing this thing up and actually getting into the season to see what teams do. Once we start to actually pay attention to the fact that ties are a thing, that injuries are a thing, that depth is going to be something really hard to come by in a 16-team effectively league. So I'm really looking forward to how this league plays out.
Oh, yeah, one of the things I wanted to point out as well was, it is a 16-team equivalent, and I don't know how many people in this league have played in large formats like that, where it is extremely difficult to acquire depth. And if you're able to have a deep roster that can cover bye weeks or cover injuries or the unforeseen, that's just gravy. Everybody is struggling with trying to put their roster together, trying to put their starters together, and the teams that have played the draft or played trades correctly and have loaded up on depth are generally going to be the ones that you have to fear for.
Right. And Joel, we're happy to have you. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, so maybe we should have recruited somebody else who knew less what they were talking about. But we're happy to have you, and thank you for joining in on the podcast. But Fred, do you have anything you'd like to say before we go?
Oh, let me see here. So we have crested the halfway point in our draft, and it should be, relatively quick to the finish now, because there's not a lot of decisions to be made. You just, you're looking at a team like even Joel. I think he pre-drafted almost every one of the guys he's got.
He's under a minute.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal. And I see teams that are, just sitting on the clock for not very much reason right now. Let's just take the guy you want and move along. We've got about 11 rounds to go. We should be able to get this done in a week or two. There's not a lot of decisions now. Just take the flyer you like and let's get it done.
But then what do we do?
Hey,
we still got the rookie, the youth.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
That's what I want to do. Let's get the rest done so we can get into those fun freshmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about in the group me a number of times, enough to annoy some owners. But I was thinking about sending an email out, because I know there are some owners that don't look in. I don't know if it's because people are just less interested in their teams, that they're taking a little bit longer than they were before, or because it's just not exciting because you're not getting these trade offers anymore. But do want to encourage you guys to remain vigilant. If you know you're going to be away for a while, like say you got work meeting for 4 hours, just put in a pre-draft so that, you know, you don't have to wait those 4 hours. That would be huge for us. You know, it's at the end, it's your choice, but when you're looking at these flyers here, if you know who you're going to take and there's no question about it, it's just going to speed up the draft. So definitely do that if that's something you like to do. If you're someone that doesn't like to do it, keep doing your thing. That's totally okay. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for listening to the podcast. I'm thrilled with how many people are listening. I think it's great. And I'm glad that, you know, everyone's still actively engaged in this chat, even in these late flyers, discussing rules, discussing trades, discussing everything. Honestly, it's a great sign for a startup league, and I couldn't be more excited. So thank you to everyone. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and you know, this is really the doldrums. This is the kind of the lowest point of the year, I think, in terms of interest. You know, the time between, you know, OTAs and training camp. So, you know, everyone's taking vacations. Everyone's got their own thing going on in the summertime. I understand that. It is what it is.
What you're saying is draft faster, you bastards.
I didn't want to be the one to say
it. I'll take the hit as league devil or whatever.
Enemy of the state, Joel. Enemy of the state.
Sorry, it sounds so much better too.
Okay, so until next week, I hope you guys have a nice week. See you next week.
Have me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.